There's some interesting words here that I was reading the other day, and it's just something that sparked a thought that I'll go down today with you, what we're looking at. These words here, it says, "He who has ears, let him hear." Now, I've read that many times, but it's always sounded weird to me because, well, most of us have ears, right? That we should be able to hear. But like many of you who are parents can attest to, just because someone has ears doesn't mean they're going to hear you or listen to you, right? In fact, yesterday, I coach a Little League baseball team a couple blocks down the road here. And I'm standing 6 feet away from my first baseman. And I'm trying to get his attention to tell him to do something. And I'm calling his name from right here multiple times. And he can't hear me. Just repeatedly, he can't hear me at all. It takes many times before I finally get his attention. So, just because you have ears doesn't mean that you hear or listen with them. Those words I found are in the New Testament about 15 times, and Jesus speaks most of those. He did not always speak plainly and clearly when he taught either, especially when he was speaking to crowds of people. He would often speak in what's called parables. And parables, of course, are like an analogous story that's meant to teach a lesson. Different things meaning different things in the story. And at a certain point in his ministry, Jesus begins to teach largely in this fashion when he's dealing with mixed crowds of people, with believers and unbelievers there. When it's not just his disciples, he'll often speak in this way. And that was something that I was thinking about. And well, let's go to Matthew chapter 13. Let's take a look, because his disciples are going to ask him, why is he speaking like this when he's out there with them? Okay, we're going to start here in Matthew chapter 13. Looking at verses 10 through 17 is when they ask him this question and his reply. All right, so beginning in verse 10, so the disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn, and I will heal them. But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it." So Jesus is telling us here that though many people do in fact possess ears, they don't hear or understand. But his followers, his true disciples that were there, they were given the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom. That's not true about everyone. His goal when he spoke these parables was not that everyone would hear and understand them, but only to those who it was given this ability to. And that if you're a believer here today, you have that privilege as well, to be able to see and hear things that even the prophets longed to see and understand. Going a few verses down, Matthew continues with this explanation. If you go down to verse 34 and 35, he's talking about speaking in parables again. It says in verse 34, Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophets. I will open my mouth in parables, and I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. So when I hear these words, he who has an ear, let him hear. And that he spoke in parables to reveal secrets that have been previously hidden since creation. I want to know and understand what these parables mean. Thank you. As a follower of Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit within us. And he is said to lead us into understanding through the Word, lead us into all truth. So as we have the ability to see the secrets of the kingdom of heaven as his followers, and now we have his Word here to read through, let us look through it and let's examine one of the parables this morning. So keep all that in mind as we look at this parable. Its parables are also found in Matthew 13. Okay? And I believe the Lord led me to speak about it this morning because I was kind of wrestling with this parable for a little while. Not nothing serious or anything, but and it's not even with the meaning of the parable, because Jesus explains the parable right here, and he gives us the meaning. So it wasn't really with the meaning. But it was kind of what the implications were. And not so much really what the implications were, because it didn't go against anything that I already believe the Scripture teaches, or what I think sound biblical theology is. But it was that I never really hear this parable talked about in the capacity that I see in it. When I read this parable, I see the sovereignty of our God. I see his overwhelming wisdom coming forth. I see that his plans are unstoppable. And I see that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But I rarely hear of this parable when we're talking about those matters. In fact, as I realized that God wanted me to talk about it this morning, and I began to look into other things and prepare for this, I read many commentaries, and I read that, most of the ones I came across really only focused on the eschatological aspects of this parable. So the study of the end times, to know, that it does deal with the end times. That's true. But I think there's just more to it than that. One of the other things that I read as well was that many tended to think that this parable was just focused and limited in scope to the church. And I think it might be a little bit broader of an understanding than that. So allow me this morning an opportunity to read the parable with you and show you what I see in it, and we can go from there. All right, so we're going to be looking at the parable of the wheat and the tares. Starting in Matthew 13, starting in verse 24, and it goes to verse 30, and then Jesus explains it, starting in verse 36 to 43. So I'm going to read that along with you right now. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servant asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered. "Because while you're pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Let's go down a couple of verses there. Beginning in verse 36 for Jesus' explanation. Then he left the crowd and he went into the house. So now he's just with his disciples. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one. And the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out his kingdom, everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear." Now, let me just briefly address why I think this parable is not dealing just with the church here. As I said, some of the commentators that I read believe that it is. My first reason is that Jesus says the field is the world. In Greek, that's the word cosmos, okay, not ecclesia, meaning church. The cosmos can sometimes refer to only the believers in the sense that God may do something for the world that is only applicable to just the believers. But the natural meaning of the word cosmos is the world, or the system of the world, or everyone. So just in the plain reading, I think he's talking about the entire world. The second reason I believe that the field is the world and not the church is that the church is actually in the parable in another spot, right? The good seed. The good seed, Jesus says, represents the children of the kingdom. Those are the ones that belong to him. And finally, the third reason I see that Jesus is speaking about the whole world and not just merely the church is his audience. Remember, he's speaking this parable to the crowd, not just to his disciples. This is to everybody that's around there. Listen, many of the people that were there were not believers. They might have been drawn because of the spectacle of things, heard about the miracles, just heard about this guy, want to know what's going on. It's a mixed crowd out there, and this is who he's speaking to. So let's dig down a little bit and examine some of the parts of the parable, starting back in verse 24. The sower, Jesus says, is himself, Son of Man. And he sowed good seed. Now, we know from John chapter 1 and Colossians chapter 1 that Jesus himself is the creator of all things. Okay? And if we remember back to Genesis chapter 1 in the creation story, as Jesus created the heavens and the earth, Moses several times tells us that what he made was made good. In fact, by the end of the creation narrative in Genesis 1, verse 31, it says this: God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. There was evening and there was morning the sixth day. So as the completion of creation happens, we know that it was proclaimed to be very good. God made it good. He created it without sin. He created it without death. It was very good. There was no sin in the world because there was no sin in the world, there was no death in the world. This is why I believe Jesus is referring to this in verse 24. The creation was made good. And if you look a couple verses down in verse 27, I believe it further supports this view, because the servants or the angels, when they see what's going on in the field, they're surprised. They're shocked. Because they have an expectation that what he sowed in that field, what he did, would be good. And they're shocked now to see these weeds growing in what they know God had originally planned and made very good. So what I believe Jesus is showing here is actually the initial state of his creation, as he made it very good. He didn't design sin. He didn't design death. He didn't make the world the way that it is today, the way that we see it is today. I also see that he only planted the good seed in his field. And the good seed, once again, are those who are the children of the kingdom. The very same that we'll see will be brought into his barn at the end, at the harvest, the same ones. His plan was to get a harvest of wheat, and he will get that harvest. Look at verse 25. There was an enemy there. Jesus says that was the devil, that was Satan, seeking to destroy God's work, seeking to bring ruin to his plan. He sneaks into the field while everyone is sleeping, by night, presumably. Goes in there while the men are sleeping, and he sows weeds all throughout the field, all throughout the world, all among the wheat. The weeds, Jesus tells us, represent those who belong to Satan. They are his children. They are his sons. They're not a product of God, but of Satan. Now, Satan is not a creator. I'm not saying, I don't believe Jesus is telling us that at all. However, Jesus does tell us that Satan is the father of something. He's the father of lies. And as the father of lies, I believe Satan's lies spread throughout the creation, intermingling themselves throughout the entire field. Just as the weeds are going to intermingle itself all through the wheat and get up around its roots. Now, Jesus likens the children of the evil one here to the weeds or the tares. In Greek, that's a word, zizania, which in my research it wasn't really clear exactly what plant that is, but it's most likely a grassy type of weed that bears some similarity in appearance to wheat. However, we can tell that it's not indistinguishable from the wheat, because also in the parable we see that the servants are able to recognize that there are weeds in the field at a fairly early stage in their development. As soon as the wheat sprouted, it began to show its fruit or its heads of grain. Then the servants are able to recognize that there's a difference. So long before the plants are mature, they're able to recognize that there are true wheat in the field and weeds growing up intermingled with them. And again, they are shocked and amazed to find the master's fields in this condition. They're expecting from their master for it to be good, that it was sown in a good way. And I believe that Jesus is showing the current state of the world, both when he's speaking now and after the fall of man. Because any onlooker to our world who just takes a look at it and studies it and sees how it's going on would no doubt see a very marvelous creation, would no doubt see something planned from the lowest levels up to the highest levels. As we study and learn more in science and we see how infinitesimally small things can, the particles are and the organisms are, and things that we could never see in the past. And then we can also look out into the stars and see far beyond we ever understood in the past, and see just how large and magnificent of a creation this is, and how it all is working together to produce life here and to work together in just an amazing way. So any onlooker can see, obviously, something that was a masterpiece, obviously something that was created wonderfully, but they can also look at it and see it filled with evil, see it filled with sin, see it filled with death over and over again as things die and are killed and eaten, and life being born again, a constant futile cycle of frustrated creation. In fact, Paul tells us in Romans 8 that the entire creation was subjected to frustration or futility because of our sin, and that it groans with pain, waiting for the redemption of the children of God. the children of the kingdom. So all of creation is subjected to this situation, and it groans in pain as it waits for the end, for God to redeem his children. So as his angels, his servants, are perplexed at what looks like to be a complete disaster in some ways. They can see the design, but they see it's messed up. They ask him if he would like them to go pull the weeds up. They're trying to help. They're trying to, fix the situation. Because to any onlooker, it might look like the enemy has succeeded. It might look like the enemy's plan has come to fruition as he's destroyed and tainted and corrupted the good creation. Anyone who looks on, or many of the scoffers that you hear, people who want to mock God, will say, what kind of God would have this? What kind of God would allow this into his creation, right? Yeah, so you might have heard many of these accusations. But has, in fact, the enemy been successful? No, he has not. You might think that he has. It might look like he has been successful, but he has not. What is really the case? Look at verse 29. Jesus says no. He tells them, no, don't go out to the field. Don't go out there and do any of that stuff. Don't pull up those weeds. Why? Why did he say that? He's unwilling to lose a single stalk of wheat that he had planted. He doesn't want any of that to be uprooted or damaged in any way before the harvest, before he comes to collect the ones that he set out from the beginning to be with. You see, from before the creation of the world, from before the sowing of the children of the kingdom, he already knew who he redeemed. Their names were already written in the Lamb's book of life from the very foundations of the world. He already knew that he would demonstrate his love, his mercy, his kindness, and his justice, and his wrath to his glory in just this way. This also kind of reminds me of something else Jesus said in John chapter 6, verse 39. And he says this, and this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of all that he has given me, but raise them up on the last day. So we see God's infinite wisdom here. Even though the world appears to be a failure to many, to some of the onlookers, to the unbelievers, to the scoffers, even the angels being perplexed at what they see. However, we can see that in this is in fact God's plan. His wisdom, this multifaceted, manifold wisdom to reveal himself to his creation, to reveal his attributes. You see, he's unwilling to lose a single stalk of wheat. He allows both to grow together as to ensure that not one stalk be uprooted and lost. He'll use his creation to nourish both together until the harvest is ready. He brings his rain upon the wheat and the wheat, allows his sun to nourish both. And his long-suffering patience is shown and displayed even to the children of the evil one. While he is just right now, if he wanted to send his angels out to pull up the weeds, to bring an end immediately to all the lies, all the sin, all the evil that has been mixed into his creation. He could do that right now and justly do it. But no, He's patiently waiting for all those who belong to him to be ready, to mature. He's waiting for that time that he has set out from the foundations of the world to gather those who belong to him into his barns. And he does this so that all his creation may know that he is God and his will be done. Now, that patience will not last forever. The parable also continues, and it shows that the harvest is coming. The end of the age is coming. And with it will be the judgment. Those who are sons of the evil one will be gathered and thrown into the fire, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Whereas, on the other hand, the wheat, the sons of the kingdom, whose names once again have been written in the book of life from before creation, are going to be gathered into his kingdom. It says here to shine like the sun. S-U-N, sun. And in this, we also see the sovereignty of God, as every child that he set forth to be with, everyone that he originally planned to have in his kingdom, is now there in his presence, in his kingdom, shining like the sun. Not one's lost, not one's uprooted, and no weeds are in his kingdom. Satan's best efforts came to nothing. They didn't stop God's plan in any way. They didn't hinder it at all. In fact, what do we see here is that not only did they not hinder his plans, not only did they not stop it or change it, they're actually used to bring God praise and glory, as we see his sovereignty and his wisdom and his power and his forgiveness and his mercy and his love, all these things being bestowed and displayed for everyone in his creation to see. All his creation is learning of his attributes and can know that what he has set up, nobody can take down. Nobody can destroy. I don't know how we're doing here on time, but I'm going to be closing here with a couple verses, and then we can pray. But I want to leave you with a couple of verses that came up as I was thinking of this, and just thinking of its implications once again. First here is Isaiah 14:27. It says, "For the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, who can turn it back?" Proverbs 21:30. "There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord." And the last, Isaiah 43:13 says, "Yes, and from ancient days I am he. No one can deliver out of my hand. When I act, who can reverse it?" When we understand that about the Lord, and as we look at these parables and understand the words he says here, he who has an ear, let him hear. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer here. Lord Jesus, I just thank you for your words. I thank you that you have given us so much in this day that we live in right now, that we can look into it and as you said here, understand things even the prophets longed to see and understand. Lord, I thank you that you have provided this, Lord. I pray that you continue to give us wisdom and understanding as we seek your words day after day, and that we pray that we can just grow closer to you in that understanding, Lord. I pray for anyone in this room is not yet saved, Lord. I pray that if they belong to you, that you would call them today, that you would call them to yourself, that they can see that, hear your words, that your words here would have gone out today and they would hear them, just as the sheep know their shepherd's voice. I pray that your will would be done here at this church and in our lives. And we just thank you and give you all honor and glory and praise. In Jesus' name.